Hi, this is Jim, and this is Call to Battle. I saw something this week that was, disturbing, to say the least. They said last year, over 49,000 people in the United States, took their own lives. And that's staggering, a staggering number. They said it's the most in our nation's history ever. And I used to work in the mental health field. I dealt with this issue with people, but this happens, and there's a variety of reasons, and I'm not going to go into, but one thing is it's a lack of hope. I mean, isn't that what causes people to go to extremes on many things, is the lack of hope? And that actually happened, and that just is scary. But in one sense, not surprising. Think about our world and how it functions, even with relationships, and I like to concentrate on relationships, but everything's negative. I mean, the world is like, everything's awful. There's toxic masculinity, how awful that is, and men are awful. And then there's climate change, and the world's going to end, and everything's terrible. And there's systemic racism and hunger and poverty, and it's just inundated with negativity, with hopelessness. There's even I saw this court case in Montana where children like 5 years old are suing the government because climate change has brought so much anxiety and stress into their life, and they need to do something about it. And a judge let it go forward. I don't know how far it's going to go, though. But the world loves hopelessness. I mean, I'm only saying they love it because, boy, do we spew it. I mean, just look at political officials. Isn't it everything negative, awful, terrible? I mean, I don't think anyone can run for office if they're being positive anymore. I think it's all negativity. But we breed this hopelessness, and we shouldn't be surprised of the outcome that this happens. But it is the opposite of God. One of the verses I want to look at is Romans 15 says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So God is about hope and about joy and about peace, and we should overflow with hope. That is what we're called to do, overflow with hope. And it's going to be up to parents and those of us to do that. Now, in relationships, when I see relationships break down, it's the loss of hope. I mean, despair. You just have to watch some of the podcasts. Podcasts I watch where women just trash men, and then men trash women, and we see all the worst of men, the worst of women, everywhere. Even when I'm counseling, one thing I say to couples when I'm counseling them is, okay, I don't want to hear what's terrible about the other person. I said, that's going to get us nowhere. That's only going to get us down a road of where you are right now, where everything's awful, everything's terrible. That is useless if you want this relationship to get stronger. If you want to see what this relationship can become, is there's no more bashing each other. And where I usually start with, okay, I want you to tell me what you're doing wrong in this relationship. So I have the person focus on themselves. And I said, okay, here's where we go wrong. Okay, how do we make it better? How do we get to a point where this isn't happening? So we focus on self. And, this is where we live in that whole realm. Is the glass half full or half empty? I think most people, it seems like it's half empty. If I look in the world, it's half empty. Everything's awful. Even when a relationship starts going bad, it's awful. I'm like, no. You're going to have trouble in a relationship because you have two people, and you have more than one person, there's going to be issues. The thing is, though, if you're always focusing on the worst, how's it going to get better? And that's what we do. I mean, we have a God who talks about hope and about joy and about peace. And we like to focus on what? On despair, on sadness, on everything's terrible. I don't know how you ever get a relationship positive when that's the way it is. I mean, too many of these podcasts. I mean, I see these podcasts where don't get married. It's awful. Women will take half of everything you have, and women can't be trusted. And I'm like, wow, how sad is that? I mean, does divorce happen? Yes, it does. It's out there. It's a reality. But you can make good choices too, and making good choices make a difference. The thing I'm really realizing is men have not been taught how to be men, how to be fathers, how to be husbands, and women aren't being taught how to be women, how to be mothers, how to be wife. I mean, that is lacking. I think one reason is there's less of two people in a household. Single moms are raising way too many kids where fathers are not involved and they should be involved. And the fathers are just showing when things get tough, run away, or the mother, when things get tough, just dump your husband. The idea of actually working through is missing. But it's in the working through, it's in diving in where the differences are made. I mean, that's when strength comes in. But we just look at it as cut and run. I was seeing a TED Talk last week, and I was really enjoying it. And this woman was talking about how she was trying to figure out how can you determine success in a person. And she went to West Point and she went to the National Spelling Bee. I'm like, interesting places to go. And she tried to figure out, can we figure out who will succeed? And she took a very scientific approach. I won't get into it all, but it wasn't just her guessing. Very scientific of how she did it. It was really clever. And she has a book on it. And my wife has the book, and I'll be reading it. But I was enjoying her TED Talk. And she said, we found how we could determine if a person was going to succeed. And it wasn't based on their gender. It was not based on their socioeconomic class, if they're rich or poor. It wasn't based on their race. That hadn't anything to do with it. She said it was based on what she calls grit. Grit is something where a person, I don't have I'm not quoting her directly, so don't hold me to this. But basically the idea that she portrayed was a grit is a person who doesn't give up. That when they fail, it's like they get stronger. A lot of times when we fail, we give up. One failure and we're ready to hang it up. A person with grit, failure is just another motivator. They just persevere. They just keep going forward. They just look to overcome. And as the person's talking, I'm laughing because I'm like, you're talking about Jesus. Jesus personifies grit. That's who he was. Think about this. Now, even if you're not a spiritual person, think about this. He's on earth, okay? He's being persecuted. In Judea, they went to stone him to death. And what happens? He later tells his disciples, okay, we got to go back to Judea. And they're like, are you crazy? They try to stone you to death there. You really want to go back to Judea? He's like, yes, I do. And like, why? Because they need God's truth. Truth is going to help them. They need me. I'm going back. So people try and kill him, and he goes back. And he doesn't go back with movies today with guns and bullets and bombs. Basically, he goes back armed with only truth, and he loves the people. This is great. He goes into the belly of the beast. People always like to see Jesus as this, this guy who walks around, soft-spoken, a pushover. He was anything but that. He was strong. He was mighty. And he would go into the fire constantly. And even when he was in the temple, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the priests, they didn't like him. That didn't stop him. And when he went in, he wasn't looking for a fight. They were looking for a fight. But it didn't scare him. Think about it. We get into an argument with a person, and we see them at the grocery store. We go down a different aisle to avoid them. Jesus goes back into it. This is with relationships. We need grit in relationships. That we're not going to give up just because times get tough, just because things are difficult. If you're going to give up every time things get difficult, you're never going to have a good relationship. And men, we got to lead the way in that. We have to, hey, I'm in this relationship. I'm not leaving it. When my wife and I got married, I went in and say, listen, divorce is not an option. It will never be an option. We will work through our issues, we'll talk through our issues, and we will find answers. And that's what we've done for 37 years. We have found answers, and the relationship has gotten better and better. It requires grit. And do not listen to this world, because with grit, you're not hopeless. With grit, you don't give up. With grit, you don't have a lack of peace. You're going to find that hope, that fulfillment, but we find it in Christ. And you said, well, I have Jesus. No, he's like, yeah, you have me, but you have to hold on, because this world attacks and attacks and attacks and attacks. You got to hold tightly to me and realize you're in this for the long haul, not to give up. And I just love that. So we can bring hope to this world. We can bring joy. We can bring peace, because the world desperately needs it. This has got to end where, people ending their lives, that's just a loss of hope. And we bring the greatest hope there is. Jesus shows us how to have strong and powerful marriages, how to have great relationships. He tells us how to be financially secure, shows us how to run a business effectively. I mean, he is the answer. But especially with relationships, he can show you how to have a strong, powerful, and effective relationship. Okay, that's what I got for you this week. Hope you're going to have a fantastic week. I look forward to talking to you soon. God bless.